Hi everyone. So this video is going to start our unit investigating the nature of the human mind. And so in this video, we're just going to introduce two views known as dualism and physicalism. So in this video, we're going to start out by reflecting on the mental and physical language that we use to describe things. And this will raise a question in the philosophy of mind having to do with, well, what is the nature of the mind? Then we'll consider, well, why should we care about this question? Then we'll introduce the view known as physicalism, and we'll talk about two kinds, the mind-brain identity theory and functionalism. Then lastly, we'll introduce the competing view known as dualism. So I want you to imagine that you're setting up a blind date between your best friend and another friend. Just call them A. Your best friend and A have never met or seen one another. How would you describe your best friend to A? So you might pause the video and write down as much of a description as you can right now. All right, now that you're back. So when you describe your best friend, you're probably going to end up using some language that gives a physical description, what we might call physical descriptors, and some language that gives a mental description, what we might call mental descriptors. On the physical side, you might describe their hair color, their eye color, their height, their weight, etc. When you start describing their sort of mental side, you might describe their beliefs, their desires or goals that they have in their life, their emotions, their personality, etc. Now, I mean, we could go even sort of more specific depending upon the context, especially with regards to sort of physical descriptions. So, for instance, if you're a medical doctor, you might describe a person's, say, cholesterol level. You might be sort of describe their heart, their organs, their lungs, their digestive system. If you're a brain scientist, you might describe sort of the physical aspects of the person's brain. All right, now, one question that arises, though, is we use these two distinct kinds of descriptions, the mental and physical descriptions of people. Well, how are those mental and physical things related? Is a person's mind just a special kind of physical stuff? Or is a person's mind something more than just their physical makeup? So why should we care about what the nature of the human mind is? Well, for one, it has important implications about, for instance, the possibility or impossibility of life after the death of our bodies. If our mind just is sort of some part of our physical body, well, then once our physical body dies, it looks as if our mind will stop existing as well. But if our mind is something over and above our body, well, then even if our body stops working and our body stops existing, maybe our mind could survive the death of our bodies. A person's mind often contains what we care about most in people as well. So, for instance, my memories of my family are much more important to me than my hair color. And so by getting a better understanding of what the mind is, it'll help us understand what it is that we think is sort of valuable in human life. It's also going to help us get a better understanding of ourselves and our place in the world around us. We often think that human beings are different than, say, a rock or a chair or a car. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we think that human beings have minds. By understanding what the mind is, hopefully that'll also put us in a better position to study how it works, which can also help us to identify and fix problems with the mind when they arise. All right, so with that little bit of sort of motivation, let's take a look at and distinguish between two general approaches to thinking about the nature of a human mind. The first view is known as physicalism. So this is a family of theories that claims that everything that exists is fundamentally physical. Now, these views, they don't usually deny the existence of the mind or mental things such as experiences, emotions, beliefs, or desires. Rather, physicalists will usually say that the mind is fundamentally to be understood as a part of physical reality. So there's various forms of physicalism, but we're only going to discuss two versions in this class. The first version is the mind-brain identity theory. So on this view, the mind just is a specific kind of physical object. So the mind is identical to a living, working brain. So mental things such as your beliefs, your desires, your emotions, your experiences, and your memories on this view just are specific physical things happening in your brain, such as certain patterns of neurons firing. Now notice a rock doesn't have a brain, so even though it's a physical thing, it doesn't have a mind because it's not the right kind of physical thing. But you have a brain, and your brain is currently living and working, and so your brain is a mind, and you have a mind. Now, descriptions of the mind and mental stuff on this view is just a different way of talking about the brain. So to talk about pain, that's just another way of talking about a specific pattern of neurons firing in your brain. In the same way that talking about Superman and Clark Kent are two different ways, two different names for talking about what is in fact, in reality, one and the same person. So when we talk about the mind and we talk about the brain, on this view, those are two names for talking about what is in reality just one single thing. The other physicalist view that we'll look at is what's known as functionalism. And this is a view that what makes something a mind or a mental state, like a belief or a pain, is its function and not the stuff from which it's made. So it doesn't matter if it's made out of brain stuff or not. What matters is what function does it have. So as an analogy, think about the case of gold. Gold is defined by the stuff it's made out of, its atomic composition. So fool's gold might look like gold. It might sound like gold, and you might use it. I mean, you could make a ring out of fool's gold. But what makes something gold is its atomic composition. It's not what it's used for. However, a chair is defined by its function rather than by the stuff it's made out of. The function of a chair is to provide a place for a person to sit. Now, some chairs might have 3 legs, some might have 2, some might have 4, some might have no legs. Some chairs might have a back, some chairs might be made out of wood, some might be made out of metal, some might be made out of plastic. But since they're all serving the same function of providing a place for a person to sit, it doesn't matter what they're made out of because it's that function that makes it a chair. So the idea here is we should think about the mind in the same way. It doesn't matter what it's made out of because what it makes it a mind is the function that it plays. So functional is like the computer analogy, where you can sort of think of as the mind as being analogous to the program or software that can be run on different hardware. So for instance, in humans, the hardware that runs the programs is the brain. So this doesn't say that the brain is the mind, rather the mind is the programs that the brain is running. However, in theory, those same programs might be run by different physical stuff. Maybe, for instance, a network of silicon chips in a digital computer might run those same programs that's being run by our brain. In the same way that one chair might be made out of wood and another might be made out of plastic, one program might be run by silicon chips, another program, that same program might be run in another creature by a brain. So functionalism, it doesn't actually need to be a version of physicalism, since it's possible that what performs this function is a non-physical thing. However, most functionalists are physicalists. They think that what runs these programs, what performs the function of the mind, of a belief, of a desire, of a memory, of a pain, is in fact some physical part of the world. The competing view here is what's known as dualism. And so this is a family of theories that holds that while yes, it does exist physical stuff, such as bodies and their features, and brains and their features, in addition to all the physical stuff, there's this extra stuff, this extra non-physical or immaterial things, such as minds and their features, like beliefs, desires, and memories. So on this view, the mind and the brain, and the things that are going on in your brain, are two distinct things, two distinct entities. The mind is also something different from the abstract programs or functions that physical things such as brains perform. So this still leaves open the possibility that the mind and the brain interact with another. So even though dualism thinks that they're different things, they might still influence one another. In the same way, I'll give you an analogy. So me and my spouse are clearly two distinct people, but we still influence one another. So the way that I behave, so if I ask my wife to grab something from the kitchen, well, she might pick it up and bring it to me. If my wife asks me to pick something off the floor, that might influence me to sort of pick it up off the floor. And so even though we are two distinct persons, we still influence one another. Similarly, even if the brain and the mind are two distinct entities, it's possible that they might be related to one another, such that what happens in one influences what happens in the other. All right, so that's it for this video. All we've done is try to get clear about what the mind-body problem is, and the views known as physicalism and the view known as dualism. See you next time.